book we had published recently. And I think I will try to share my screen with you and then we can start. And I'm sorry, I won't be able to see directly what you are typing up in the chat. So please do not hesitate to interrupt me as soon as you have a question, a comment, a remark, or anything. And I might not be able, I'm entering this platform via Zoom, so I may not be able to hear or see your raised hands or something. So please just interrupt me, say something, and I will shut up and will be happy to answer your questions. So can anybody hear me?
Can you hear us?
Yay, great, terrific. So I will start right now, and the second anybody thinks that you have a question, a comment, a remark, please interrupt me and let's have a proper conversation, because, well, my book presentation is just, I don't know, I don't think it is very important because you can download it and read it and see everything for yourself. So I just wanted to tell you about the process, how we came to publishing this book. My name is Dmitry Pobedash, and I'm an associate professor at the Ural Federal University in Russia. That's in Yekaterinburg, right on the borderline between Europe and Asia. So for people outside Russia, we're Siberia. For Russians, it's a bit more nuanced. We're the Urals, not Siberia, but it's nothing very important. So here is the book we published, Nuclear Russia, International and Domestic Agendas. And it was made possible by the Swedish Radiation Safety Authority. In Swedish, that's Strålsäkerhetsmyndigheten. They started working with universities in Siberia originally back in 2004, then 2007. And their idea was to work with universities outside of Moscow first, and second, to bring together people from, as they call them, technical sciences, like physics, like chemistry, and or like export control, and bring them together with liberal arts people or social science people, so that we could have a proper dialogue and understand both how, for example, the reactor works and what consequences it can have for the society and what society can think about that. So they started working with both, as they call them, technical and humanities universities originally in Siberia, and helped us organize workshops and then summer schools for students. And it was so successful that right now some of our ex-students are prominent people in Moscow universities, in organizations closely connected with the Kremlin. So they are, if not defining, then influencing the nuclear non-proliferation policies of Russia. So basically we can speak of the fruits of our labor being tangible right now. And the Swedish Radiation Safety Authority does not have opportunities to organize workshops by themselves. So first they addressed us, the universities, and asked us to do that. And of course they helped us with the money. And they also linked us with the Center for Non-Proliferation Studies in the USA in Monterey, California, and with the Swedish International Peace Research Institute. So some of us, myself included, were sent to the United States and to Stockholm and have guest research and not internships, but yes, guest researchers were over there. And it was paid for by the Swedish Radiation Safety Authority. They also organized a number of seminars and workshops and meetings with the leading figures in nuclear non-proliferation, including and the ex-Secretary General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Hans Blix, in 2010. We met with him in Stockholm and he gave us a lecture and he had a long conversation explaining the important issues of nuclear non-proliferation. The Swedish Radiation Safety Authority also organized and paid for workshops at Vienna Center for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation, and also with the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty Organization, which is also located in Vienna. So they physically brought us to Stockholm, to Vienna, to Monterey, California, organized those, just like Vlad is doing right here, right now. But they worked only with the people from the nuclear non-proliferation sphere, and they brought together people from Georgia, Ukraine, Moldova, Russia, Belarus, brought all of us together. And it was, I think that was one of the best possible examples of peace and conflict resolution. For example, we've been working like that from 2010, and even after the tragic events between Russia and Ukraine started and continued, even in 2014, 2015, they brought together Ukrainians and Russians. So despite a terrible situation between our two countries, we as researchers of non-proliferation kept meeting each other, kept talking, kept discussing common issues, and kept working together, which is, I think, a wonderful thing in our conflict-ridden world. And while studying under the aegis of the Swedish Radiation Safety Authority, we also started producing the results of that education. So first we wrote together a course book on nuclear non-proliferation, and it was the first, well, okay, let me say it differently. It was the second book on nuclear non-proliferation published in Russia, the second course book. So there had been some academic research on the issue, but when you start teaching a course at the university, you were left with primary sources, which is great, and not enough of them. You had to search for primary sources by yourself. You had to work out the complete course from the very beginning. And just imagine that a young professor, for example, starts teaching a course on nuclear non-proliferation and has no resources ready and available. So ours was the second book in Russia published as a course book for nuclear non-proliferation. And it was the first published outside Moscow. So there was this regional perspective as well. And it was, and I think still is, the first which combines both technical perspectives and social science perspectives. Some of the chapters were written by physicists, nuclear physicists, or people working in enrichment industry, for example, while others were written by social science people. My chapters were about history and history of nuclear weapons development and the meaning nuclear weapons, let me put it differently again, how politicians in different periods of times saw nuclear weapons as an instrument of foreign policy and sometimes even an instrument of domestic policy as well. And the second chapter was about regime theory and what different approaches in regime theory say about the nuclear non-proliferation regime. Questions, comments, remarks, please interrupt me any second. I will be happy about that. The second edition of the same book was published in 2017, and we made it larger. And for example, I had the same two chapters, but a bit larger, and added with a friend of mine who is a physicist. She had studied physics originally. So we together added a chapter on international control of nuclear energy and of the safeguards the International Atomic Energy Agency imposes in nuclear non-proliferation. So this book, unfortunately, is available only in Russian, but I guess there are only two course books, like proper large course books with lists of sources, with additional literature, with additional resources attached to them that exist in Russia. Then we
Sir,
went,
we have a question. We have a question from the audience.
yay, please.
Yes. We've been saving them up. Go ahead, and you just want to come on up. You can be a featured questionnaire.
Yeah, this is gonna be.
So we just want to make sure you can hear it, Dimitri. Our participant she's entering the question area.
Dimitri, can you see us okay?
Yeah, terrific.
Okay, excellent.
Can I have
excellent.
your question now?
One of our students.
Yes. I would like just to know, I know there is a new generation of reactors that is supposed to be much more safe than the old ones. I know that a lot of lessons have been learned from Fukushima and Chernobyl. What is the new advancement in this new generation, and is it actually expected to come into place at 2030, or do you think it will be delayed to 2050? Because I know there's some, industries in China and Russia that are kind of competing for these technologies at the moment.
Terrific. That's a huge question, and I guess we should organize a separate conference. You know that there is this, I'm serious, actually, there is this fast neutron reactor, and guess where it is located? The only commercially working fast neutron reactor in the world works like right here, close to Yekaterinburg, close to the city I work from. And the International Atomic Energy Agency organized a couple of years back, organized a conference on fast neutron reactors, and guess where? Again, in our city. But the question is actually terribly politicized and very complicated. On the one hand, globally, nuclear energy is like 6% of the global consumption of electricity. So it's almost nothing. But on the other hand, in different countries, this ratio is quite different. Let's say France or Slovenia depend heavily on nuclear energy. So it is very different in different countries, and we have to think about the domestic politics over here as well. Second, interestingly, nuclear energy is the cleanest, but if you deal with the irradiated fuel, and again, even this issue is very politicized. For example, throughout the world, usually say like nuclear wastes or spent fuel. In Russia, you do not even say spent fuel, because the logic is we just do not know how to extract a lot of energy which is still left in that fuel. We do not even call it spent, we call it irradiated. And we do not have to bury it, we have to keep it safe so far, and then bring it back to industry. And of course, you know about the MOX fuel and these attempts to combine irradiated fuel with other things and keep on producing more and more energy. And of course, there are lots of, again, issues connected with that. A brilliant example of keeping this irradiated fuel is Sweden, Forsmark. Forsmark is a nuclear power plant very close to Stockholm, and they have a brilliant, wonderful storage of irradiated fuel. So you may want to write me an email and I will give you all the data about that. So right now we are at a crossroads. It's great to be able to use nuclear energy because it's reliable, it's clean, if you forget about the fuel, and it is one of the options which can save a lot of fossil fuels. For example, Iran says, yes, we have a lot of oil, but we would like to keep this oil resources for ourselves or for sale. And in terms of producing electricity, we'd be happy to use nuclear energy. So on the whole in the world, to cut long story short, overall in the world, 6% doesn't seem significant. But regionally and locally, nuclear energy is very, very important. And for Russia, it is also terribly important because it's one of the technological areas where Russia is still a huge power. I'm sorry to have to admit that, but we are lagging behind in many technological spheres. But with nuclear energy, we are still at the cutting edge. So it would be great politically if we continued working with that. And I'm sorry if I'm not answering your questions. Please ask. I would like to clarify.
No, like I think in the end of the day, you are very right to say it's also a domestic issue. And right now it stands on 6% and it's second to hydro energy. But once the new reactors take into action and depends which state produced them first, that would be a different conversation. I was just interested in your prediction of when that might happen and how safety became, like if it will become really not a concern anymore, because I know they're working on independent systems that will not have to be monitored.
There are lots of interesting things over there. For example, the thermonuclear reactor, physicists have been 50 years ago, they said, well, in 10, 15 years, we'll have them running. 10, 15 years later, they said, well, in 10, 15, right now they keep saying the same. Well, in 10, 15 years, we will have those commercial thermonuclear reactors. So it's difficult to predict anything. As for the safety, there are brilliant, wonderful ideas. For example, the nuclear reactors of the former Soviet submarines. There are hundreds of them. And it is quite possible to make them, to use them as a kind of a battery. You just put it into the ground, you cover it with lots of safety and security features, and basically you make an outlet for electricity running outside, and that's it. And you forget about it for 10, 20 years. This is a brilliant idea, but not realized yet. Although right now there is this floating power plant manufactured in St. Petersburg. And originally the idea was to supply electricity to Sri Lanka. And it was during the conflict on Sri Lanka. It's great that this project was not developed at that time, but right now this, well, basically ship with a nuclear power plant on board is active, was manufactured in St. Petersburg, and basically it means that you can send the ship to any island, to any port, and you will have electricity available for the whole area over there, which is a brilliant project. But again, safety and security issues are of a huge concern yet. And interestingly, we do not even know of many, well, we know, but the general public does not even know about, for example, a catastrophe which almost happened in Nebraska in the United States. There could have been not quite Fukushima, but a terrible disaster over there after the flood on the Missouri River. And interestingly, with on the one hand, those issues are domestic. On the other hand, it needs international control and international supervision and international cooperation. What is good about the USA and Russia that we managed to cooperate. What is bad, sometimes we disregarded the international community. And with that flood, for example, Americans wanted to hush-hush everything during the Obama administration in 2011. And the Russian sort of nuclear authority published information about a possible flooding of that nuclear power plant on its website in Russian. Immediately there was a request from the State Department and Department of Energy to put it down. So Russian authorities also hushed it. And it was kind of an information blackout on that potential disaster. So with the IAEA and CTBTO, it's great that we can keep an eye on possible disasters, but sometimes great powers like the United States, China, Russia, try to hide away some things which may lead to disastrous consequences.
Thank you.
And interestingly, with the safety and security things, it's very often physicists say everything is absolutely safe, but Chernobyl, well, that was an exception. That was a crazy situation. It couldn't have happened. It was, the chances were like negligent. Okay, then you have Fukushima. Well, that was almost an impossible situation. The chances were negligible. But the problem is it's not only about the probability of the event, but of the seriousness of consequences. So there is always a trade-off. The probability of that event is minimal, but the consequences can be absolutely disastrous. So we have to balance between the two. Anything else?
All right, thank you, Dmitry. That was one of our BAR students, and we will, we'll continue to have questions, and we'll let you know if we do.
Great, great. As soon as you have a question or a comment, please don't hesitate to interrupt.
Someone, just so you know, in the chat said that you're doing a great job.
Oh, thanks.
And we agree, so thank you.
Thank you. So after the two textbooks, we decided to go deeper into research and published a monograph. And again, I'm sorry, it's only in Russian. And my chapter, the whole book was about new challenges to the non-proliferation regime. And my chapter was sort of a review of what new risks and challenges there are for the nuclear non-proliferation regime and how we can start researching them from different theoretical perspectives. So you know that there is no meta theory right now, and people sometimes are broken into sort of realist camp, liberal camp, constructivist camp, and they are trying to find a common ground, but there is no one correct theory of either international relations in general or nuclear non-proliferation in particular. So over there, I tried to explain how we can combine different approaches into such a working matrix, ideas, institutions, interests in any order. How we can study interests, institutions, ideas, and understand issues of the nuclear non-proliferation regime. And then eventually, at last, here is the book, and it is available. You can download it. If you fail to download it, send me an email and I will send you an electronic copy. There are some hard copies available, but I'm afraid, and here is this book with Kandinsky. Yay, we had that. Both of our course books also had Kandinsky on the cover, so it's kind of a tradition. And there are some copies at St. Petersburg University, so if you desperately need a hard copy, we can try and send you. But the text itself is free, available on the internet in academia.edu or at this site. And it was published only in September 2020, so it's pretty new. And the book is subdivided into three large chapters, well, three large areas. or okay chapters. The first chapter is about strategy in politics in general, and the first subchapter, written by a friend of mine from St. Petersburg University, discusses the role of nuclear weapons in the Russian military strategy, how it changed, and it's a terrible subject. Many of us covered it in our chapters. You may have heard that, for example, Putin mentioned this potential of Russia to evaporate the United States. And he also discussed our logic of retaliatory strike. So if you want to know more about that, you can read either my chapter or this chapter. The second subchapter in this field was about reduction of the American and Russian nuclear arsenals. And up to now, our two countries possess like 90% of strategic nuclear weapons. So on the one hand, our two countries do the most in nuclear disarmament. But on the other hand, it's just because we had almost all of those weapons. So when we reduce our nuclear arsenals, that's basically the whole nuclear armaments reduction that we have in the world. Then another friend of mine from St. Petersburg wrote a chapter about Russia in the nuclear non-proliferation regime, which includes disarmament, arms control, non-proliferation, different areas. Another colleague from the Ural Federal University, from my university, discussed why Russia in particular does not support the newest treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. You know that there appeared such a treaty, and it is already ratified by the necessary number of states, but the P5, the great powers, the permanent members of the UN Security Council, and the nuclear weapon states do not support this treaty, and very much emphatically against it. They even say that it is destructive to the whole non-proliferation regime. So a more detailed, a more nuanced explanation of the Russian position can be found in that chapter. And the third one is about what does Russian society think about nuclear weapons? How Russian, interestingly, lay people and students of international relations, how Russians feel about the role and place of nuclear weapons in the foreign policy of Russia and in providing the Russian position in the world, or protecting the Russian position in the world. And interestingly, that I'm afraid that very many people see Russia as being threatened, or if not being threatened, that yes, we have enemies, and yes, we ought to have nuclear weapons. So the Russian nuclear status is largely justified by the Russian society. Again, if you want more details, you can read that chapter over there. Yet another chapter was written by an interesting team of a philosopher and a nuclear physicist. Together, they discussed how nuclear non-proliferation issues were taught at Russian universities, how in general, both nuclear production, nuclear construction, and nuclear non-proliferation, how all that was taught in the Russian university and is taught in Russian university. And here is my chapter, the state of the field of the Russian academic non-proliferation research. Again, I can give you more details about that, but I will rush immediately to conclusions. It is heavily concentrated in Moscow. Over 60% of dissertations are defended in Moscow, like PhD dissertations. About 1/3 of them are about the United States or Russian-American relations. So you may think that Iranian nuclear problem is very important, or Indian or Pakistani or Chinese, but all the nuclear issues in the world make up for 2/3 of dissertations, and 1/3 is about the United States. All of them are very state-centric, and they're mostly about reduction of nuclear arsenals or about arms control. So export control is downplayed, societal dimensions are very much downplayed. Mostly it's arms control. And what was very puzzling is that there is almost no theoretical discussion. Everything is taken for granted that it's kind of a structural political realism. The state is the actor, the nuclear weapons are an element of power, that's it. Distribution of power, polarity and polarizations are the only thing we should consider. So I cannot say that there is anything apart from structural realism in those dissertations. And if you dig deeper, not just dissertations, but academic discourse, public discourse in this academic field, there are 10, 15 people residing in Moscow. They're closely connected with the Kremlin. They work either in the governmental institutions or closely with the governmental institutions. They're funded by the state. So basically, it's that in the United States, there was this military-industrial complex, and in late 70s, Hans Morgenthau complained that there is also a military-industrial academic complex. This is an example of this complex. They work very closely with the government, even if they do not coincide entirely with the official viewpoint of the government. They're very close to it. And they can be subdivided into institutionalists who say, we have enough nuclear weapons, we should keep on talking about reducing these arsenals. We should continue our talks in arms reduction. Just because it's a wonderful institution, we should keep, for example, the New START treaty, because it's a very good institution which keeps Russian-American dialogue. And the second group, I would call offensive realists, who say, okay, so Americans want to withdraw from the New START. All right, it can be profitable for us. We should push them further. We should find our reasons to blackmail them into what is profitable for us. So here is the bottom line. There is this political academic complex in Moscow, and if you try to start studying nuclear non-proliferation in Russia, you will be actually sort of pushed into this, through this funnel of selection. You will be limited to the works of 10, 15 people who reside in Moscow. So we badly need alternative voices, and this is, I think, is the most important thing about our book, that you have voices from St. Petersburg, Tomsk, Yekaterinburg, from real Russia. Moscow is, slightly different. And it took us 3 years. Well, the whole cooperation continues for over a decade. We started writing this book in 2017, so we wrote it within 2 years, and publishing took yet another year. And that would be the challenge for this conference. If you can organize a good team and put together good work, that eventually you can publish a wonderful book on peace and conflict resolution. That seems to be about it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dmitry. Just so you know, I think there's a number of questions. Lynn Howard says it's a great idea. There's a number of questions, I think, in your chat.
I see the chat now. Yeah, terrific.
Okay, great. And then after you answer those, I think we have some questions in the room too.
Great. So shall we start with the room, the chat, or what?
Go ahead and start with the chat. I think the chat's been building those up.
Uh-huh. In South Africa, a lot of controversy to nuclear builds by Russia, which creates huge debt for the country for many generations. The first deals were challenged and pushed back, but this year, there seems to be new promotion of nuclear builds. Some of the controversy was related to alleged corruption. I'm no expert in South Africa. Last time I was there was back in 1995. I'm sorry, I cannot give you details on this issue. I can say that Russia is right now on the cutting edge of building nuclear reactors, and we are the only country in the world which has it all, everything from mining to enrichment, the cheapest and I would argue one of the best enrichment technologies in the world, to turnkey production of just about everything. But I'm not saying Russian reactors are the best, but they are very reliable despite Chernobyl. Yet Russian reactors are very reliable and very good, and the technology of fuel supply is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But on the other hand, there are countries with interesting alternative technologies. For example, Canadian technology is great that you do not have to stop the whole reactor to change the fuel. You can do it while basically running without stopping the reactor, which is absolutely wonderful. Besides, there is a lot of political tension around it. For example, in Eastern Europe, in the Czech Republic, or in Eastern Europe in general, in other places as well, Russian fuel was used for many decades. And right now they would be happy to keep on using Russian fuel. But there are also concerns about diversity, about diversifying their electricity energy supplies. And nobody wants to be hooked upon one monopolist. And if Russia is a monopolist in supplying fossil fuel energy and nuclear energy, that's no good. So for political reasons, many countries, including the Czech Republic or Ukraine, try to switch over to Westinghouse, to American fuel, for example. And of course, there is a lot of competition and rivalry between the producers of fuel. So when there is a talk of corruption, there can be a lot of corruption, I'm sure, but there is also this political element and this competition element that the Russian technology is very good, very reliable. So to compete with that, sometimes there are not very good things are used. Although, yeah, it's interesting that Russia unfortunately loses in this competition, and sometimes Argentina wins a tender. Well, South Korea is brilliant, so the competition is very severe, but I would vote for the Russian fuel and the Russian manufactured nuclear power plants, because I really think that they are very good and very reliable. There was a question concerned by the pursuit in the US and Russia for increasingly powerful conventional weapons, thermobaric, etc., for their potential to lower the nuclear threshold and create proliferation pressures. That's a great idea and a terrible issue. Yet another issue is that even the nuclear weapons themselves, when we speak about tactical nuclear weapons, where's the threshold between tactical and strategic? In Russian-US relations, it was deemed that, let's say, 3,000 miles or so, 3,500 miles or so, this is strategic. But right now, distances do not matter. The yield, okay, 20 kilotons is strategic or tactical. And right now, yes, there are thermobaric and other weapons which can have a very close yield, or sometimes this is a very controversial point in Russian-American relations. If you can have, let's say, a strategic missile, but with non-nuclear warhead, it should not be controlled, it should not be observed. But if the Russian stations catch a ballistic strategic missile flying to Russian territory, or apparently, seemingly flying towards Russian territory, is it nuclear or non-nuclear? How can we check it? No way. So there are lots of very sensitive issues over here. Or an interesting thing is that factors within the nuclear weapons itself can be slightly changed. So there is less radioactivity, but more energy goes into, let's say, electromagnetic surge or into other factors. So if it is kind of a nuclear weapon originally, but most of the power is transferred into the electromagnetic surge, does it stop it from being a nuclear weapon? No, yeah, but threshold is definitely lower. So we're speaking about societal changes. Another societal change is lowering of the nuclear taboo. Right now, the current generation of politicians did not witness the atrocities of the Second World War. They do not understand how terrible the war is. So right now, all the people who witnessed the Second World War died out, and the current politicians, I'm sorry, but they may think that war is a convenient method of resolving issues. And Putin already said openly that, okay, so there will be a thermonuclear war. All right, we have this retaliatory capability. We can evaporate the whole of the world, but we will be evaporated as well. But we are good Christians. We will confess our sins and we will go to paradise. While those, he didn't say Americans, but he said, while those sinners will go to hell. Oh, thank you so much. Very reassuring. And interestingly, such conversation was absolutely unthinkable. And now such things are said openly. So thresholds are being lowered. I'm sorry to have to say that.
Okay, thank you. As an American, that is something to certainly think about. I'm going to have Dr. Manouk.
Yeah, I lost you. There was another question. No more questions in the chat over here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, can I go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Dimitri, for your very informative presentation. Question, in the United States, during Obama's administration, President Obama held 5 summits: 2009 UN Security Council, 2010 Washington Summit, 2012 The Hague, 2014 Seoul, South Korea, 2016 Washington. Trump administration, 0 summit. Should we be concerned?
Yes, we should, because it's a great thing when we have a platform, an institution, when we can at least discuss such things. But unfortunately, even the last summit was not, the last summit under Obama was not quite a success. And I'm sorry to have to admit it, the Russian position did not contribute to the success of the summit. Actually, it contributed to the failure of it. So Washington summits, originally, it was a brilliant thing. It could have become a brilliant, yet another institution of at least keeping up the dialogue, but didn't work out.
I think that based upon our agenda, unfortunately, our time has come to an end.
Let's keep
But you can have my address from email address from Vlad, or over here I'm typing it up in.
And I think the additional questions we're gonna make sure too that they get covered on the panel.
Thank you so much for your attention. And thanks for the questions, and I hope we will be able to keep on talking because there is so much to resolve over here.
Did you hear that? Okay, so there probably is going to be some time. We're getting ready to do a panel, but go ahead and please stay with us, and we think you can. There's more questions to be answered at that time. Okay.
Terrific. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. So
Thank you. So 15 minutes break and see you soon.
terrific. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.